It's time to get ready for the Buffalo Bills Monday night contest against the Denver Broncos, and I'm joined by Locked On Broncos host Sayre Bedinger today to discuss it on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of Go Bills and Buffalo's Run, also the co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. Please be sure to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This crossover Thursday is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. I'm Joe Marino, host of Locked On Bills, joined by Sayre Bedinger, the outstanding host of Locked On Broncos, and we're here to get you ready for Monday Night Football in Western New York, Highmark Stadium. The Buffalo Bills at 5-4 are hosting the Denver Broncos, who are at 3-5, but coming off of a big win over Kansas City. I know that was a big one for Denver, getting away from that losing streak to the Chiefs. Of course, the Bills are always happy when the Chiefs lose, so we can celebrate that together. Coming off the bye, the Bills coming off a loss to the Bengals. A fun one to break down. Feels like an important one for both teams. Sayre, I'm excited to talk about this football game. Welcome.
I'm excited too, Joe. It's great to finally get to do a crossover with you. And like you said, I mean, Bills and Broncos, I feel like we've been kind of maybe rooting for each other a little bit. You said you root for the Broncos against the Chiefs. I know Broncos fans definitely been rooting for the Bills quite a bit the last handful of years. If we can't beat the Chiefs, somebody's got to do it, right? So Broncos fans have been rooting hard for Buffalo in recent years. And of course, you know, this will be the biggest, one of the biggest things, Von Miller getting to play against the Broncos for the very first time. Going to be an emotional one, I think, for many in Broncos country.
You know, when I was preparing for this crossover conversation earlier today, it was the first time that it hit me that this was Von Miller's, is it his first game against Denver? I'm sure it is. He probably didn't play him when he was with the Rams. So that's very unique. And the deal with Von Miller is, man, oh man, was he so good for those first 9-10 games before he got hurt with the injury, is everything Brandon Beane had in mind when he gave him a 6-year, $120 million contract. Tore his ACL, and let me tell you, the man has not been the same. He came back against Jacksonville in week 5. I've watched every snap, and I don't think he's close to looking like himself. I think it's great that he's trying to play through it, but he's not necessarily been a positive addition to this Bills defense where they've needed some reinforcements based on injury. So I know that, you know, Von's on good terms with everyone in Denver. We're all rooting for him, but he's a shell of himself right now, if I'm being candid.
Yeah, and that's tough because, you know, obviously he's a great guy to root for. I mean, he's a legend in Broncos country, obviously, but he's also just one of the true good guys of the NFL. And you know, it does. I've been watching as well. It hurts. You know, I'd love to see him out there racking up sacks, you know, doing the Von Miller sack dances. But unfortunately, you know, maybe that's not where we are. Baron Browning on the other side, though, he's kind of taken up the mantle of those, you know, those unique sack dances. So I don't know if we'll get to Josh Allen's pretty elusive when he plays against the Broncos. I don't know if we'll get to see many of those this week, but you never know.
Yeah, it's going to be a big part of my conversation for the next segment when we get into the matchups. I have some thoughts on those Broncos pass rushers, but as we get into it, you think about the biggest storyline for each team. Sayre, what is it on Denver's side of things entering this game?
Really, it's can they keep that momentum going after what we saw against Kansas City, right? I mean, that was, like you said, it is a huge victory for the franchise as a whole. I mean, the new ownership group bought the team last year. It was an embarrassing year. I mean, that they said that, not their words, not mine. It was embarrassing for them to go down the way they did, especially against the Rams on Christmas Day last year. So you make the wholesale changes, you make the big trade for Sean Payton and pay him what we assume to be an obscene amount of money to come and be your head coach. You go out and spend more than almost anybody in free agency, $100 million on the stadium. That win against the Chiefs, though, I think is the crowning achievement amongst all of it, right? Is Sean Payton being able to rebound from utter embarrassment, that 70-point game against the Miami Dolphins, which I seem to continually be bringing up, although I'm trying to erase it from memory. But that 70-point game, a low point in among low points, really. And then you come back and you beat the Chiefs and you hold them to 28 total points in 2 matchups within, 17 days of each other. So really, really great to see the Denver Broncos bouncing back that way. They won 2 straight games going into the bye. And the biggest storyline for them is that finally, for I think the first time since I joined Locked On Broncos, it's can they keep something good going, and I don't know. Well, it's arguably the toughest ask possible to go on in prime time against a guy that's been dominant against them to do that. So can Sean Payton, coming out of the bye where he's been really effective as an NFL head coach, can they keep that momentum going?
You mentioned that 70-point game. And what's interesting is in the moment, it felt crazy, right? On both sides of the things. Denver, can they play defense? Miami, is it the greatest offense in the history of the NFL? I'd argue that it was maybe the worst thing that could have happened for Miami and maybe the best thing that could have happened for Denver, because that defense has really bounced back, right? The last 3, they've held under 20 points, including 2 matchups against the Chiefs. Meanwhile, the expectations for Miami, right, offensively every week to show up and just score crazy amounts of points is really setting an unfair expectation. And so maybe in the moment we didn't realize it, but coming out of it, I think the response and the narratives about both teams have maybe helped them, or in the case of the Dolphins, hurt them. But we're not here to talk about the Dolphins. You can listen to Locked On Dolphins for that. They couldn't get it done against the Chiefs, right? But whatever. The big thing with the Bills is, you mentioned kind of carrying some momentum. The Bills got to bounce back here. They're coming off a tough loss to the Cincinnati Bengals. And let's face it, the season hasn't gone the way Bills Mafia wanted it to go, right? They're 5-4. That's not what anybody wanted. There's higher expectations. Now, the Bills have had some regular season lulls throughout their glow up, right? Since 2020, they've kind of been one of the better teams in the league. But they've had some lulls. 2021, they were 7-6, and they had a 9-6 loss to the Jaguars, the Urban Meyer Jaguars, and like a 45-13 loss to the Colts that year. And by the end of the season, they win the division. And a lot of people thought that was the best chance they had to win the Super Bowl. Of course, it ended with 13 seconds. Of course, the Chiefs, there we are, back to that. But they do need to bounce back, and they need to find their stride. They're back home, Monday Night Football, and they got to start a little run here if they're going to really make some noise in the AFC, with a home game against Denver and then a home game against the Jets before you face the Philadelphia Eagles in Philly. And right now, offensively, the Bills certainly have their moments, but there's these ruts, there's these lulls in games that it's getting in the way of them playing good complementary football. We're talking, for example, against the Bengals last week, 9 possessions. They scored a touchdown on the first one, scored a touchdown on the last one, the middle 7, 3 points. And there's these lulls like this every single week offensively. Meanwhile, defensively, they're banged up, right? I think most people understand the injuries on that side of the football to Matt Milano and to Trey White and to Daquan Jones. And then that doesn't even include the intermittent injuries that just happen on a weekly basis. They're shorthanded on that side of the football, and it's really showing up. You look at EPA, the first 4 weeks of the season, they're top 5 in defensive EPA. The last 5 weeks of the season, they're 30th. They're not playing good football on the defensive side of the football, and I think they need to become more opportunistic, right? They haven't had much luck with takeaways, and it's not good complementary football. They're not. Even the punting game has not been solid. Even Tyler Bass, their high-priced kicker, has had a few misses lately. So I think the Bills got to kind of find themselves in all 3 phases of their operation, and it's got to start soon, because we're past the midway point of the season, and good teams go on runs. And so if the Bills are going to be the team they think they are, the team that people expect them to be, I think that starts with getting on track on Monday Night Football at home against the Denver Broncos.
And I think this would be, honestly, as compared to maybe a few weeks back, like for Buffalo, this wouldn't just be like one of those games that, okay, you got to go get a win because it's a bad team. Like this, I think now this would qualify as a quality win for them. I mean, the Broncos are playing some good football, especially defensively right now. So whereas in previous crossovers, we've joked, like, could the Broncos be a get right game for
Yeah.
every team that they've played against? Basically, now this is a team where you look at the trends and where things are going. Because I think from Broncos fans' perspective, you're looking at Buffalo and you're saying, okay, top 5 scoring offense, top 5 scoring defense, Josh Allen, who's absolutely killed us since he basically came into the league. You know, you're seeing all those things and you're thinking, okay, this is we're setting ourselves up to be disappointed. But what you're saying is they're trending certain ways or kind of up and down in certain areas. And, you know, so that's good for Broncos fans to understand, is that this is an opportunity, I think, for both of these teams, for Buffalo to potentially get a quality win against, even though it's a 3-5 team, I guess you are what your record says you are, but a quality win against a pretty improved Broncos team over the last month. And then for the Broncos on the other side, it would be, hey, I mean, you go into Buffalo, you get a win on the road. What does that say about the progression that you've made? So I think for both sides, a really great opportunity.
Yeah, this is a Bills team that lost to the Jets after having a 10-point lead at halftime, and Zach Wilson's at quarterback. They gave up 29 points to the Patriots and lost in New England. There's no gimmies, right? There's nothing to take for granted with the way that this Bills team has played this season. And certainly you want to call it a get-right game just because you need to win it, but you can't take anybody lightly at this point in the season. All right, we're going to talk matchups here in just a moment. I've got some fun things to get into in terms of some of my ideas for that Denver defense and some of the challenges that they present. But I got to tell you about DoorDash, folks. I'm obsessed. I'm not going to lie. The convenience of DoorDash is unmatched. We're all busy, right? We're all wondering what we're going to eat for dinner, when we're going to get to the grocery store. Heck, maybe you want a snack and there's just nothing in the pantry. Well, guess what? DoorDash can take care of that for you. Just go on the app. You pick something out, they deliver it right to your front door. It's absolutely incredible. And I especially love getting food from my favorite local restaurants. There's an Italian restaurant down the street, Rosario's. They have amazing chicken parm. I love their pizza. Their garlic knots are outstanding. My daughter loves spaghetti, so she gets that all the time. And you just go to DoorDash, they bring it right to your front door. So stop worrying about what's for dinner. Stop worrying about what you're going to snack on. Stop worrying about when you're going to find time to get to the grocery store, and let DoorDash handle that for you. Got a deal here. Get 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order. When you download the DoorDash app and enter code LOCK23, subject to change, terms apply. Don't forget to use code LOCKED23 for 50% off up to a $10 value on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and spend $15 or more. Subject to change, terms apply. All right, Sayre, it's time to talk about matchups. And I got a couple of things written down, but where does your mind go here when you consider this game? What are the matchup, or what's that top matchup for you that can decide things?
Well, I think there's maybe one that stands out almost every week, and it's the Broncos have played a lot of really good receivers this year. I mean, starting in week 1 with Javonte Adams, and you could go all the way down the line. But really, Pat Surtain against Stefon Diggs is something that I think everybody's going to be excited to see how that works out, because Pat Surtain has done an excellent job when he's been asked to follow around a number 1 receiver, or if he's been asked to cover Travis Kelce. He doesn't make very many mistakes. I know you're a draft guy. I know you followed him back in his draft process. I think Pat Surtain, the cool thing about him for me has always been he plays like a pro, and he did when he was 18 years old at Alabama, and he does now with the Denver Broncos. Nothing is too big for him. He's able to bounce back quickly if he does make mistakes, which are rare, few and far between. So how do the Bills find a way to exploit that matchup? Because I know how big Stefon Diggs is, obviously, to their offense. I'm not telling your listeners anything you don't know, but Pat Surtain is key to the Broncos having team success defensively. If he can take away that one player or that one side of the field, it really opens up opportunities for the pass rushers, for guys like Justin Simmons and PJ Locke on the back end. So really want to see how often does Vance Joseph send him just wherever Stefon Diggs is going, and how does Pat Surtain respond if he does maybe give up a play or two early on in the game?
Yeah, that was my number one thing I had written down. Bills passing game versus Denver, and I have the name Patrick Surtain written down. I mean, best young corner in football, certainly one of the best 1 or 2, right? It's a short list, and Pat Surtain is on it. Like you said, a pro, right? A cerebral player that just never panics, understands coverage concepts, and is really sticky in coverage. And it's a big test for the Bills and Stefon Diggs. And the one thing that's really interesting about Josh Allen and Stefon Diggs, they play these, it's the NFL. You play good corners all the time. They don't seem to care. Like, they're still going to test it. And so that's going to be fun to see those one-on-one battles and what happens at the catch point and what type of separation Diggs can get. And so I think that's obviously a big matchup. But for as important as that matchup is, it's kind of the other stuff about the Bills passing game against Denver that really intrigues me, because, it's good on good. What does the rest of it look like? How do the Bills have really had this emergence of Dalton Kincaid, their first round pick, a really good pass catching tight end, and Khalil Shakir, a second year player out of Boise State, who have become important pieces of this offense. And that doesn't even mention Gabe Davis, who's their number 2 receiver, who's been really inconsistent. I mean, he has less than 25 receiving yards in 3 of the last 4 games. And a lot of that is because his opportunities are shifting more towards Dalton Kincaid and Khalil Shakir. So what answers does Denver have for the other weapons? We know Surtain's going to be their answer for Diggs. Is it Damari Mathis? He's had a rough year. Is that going to be a guy that draws some assignments that the Bills can take advantage of? What are they going to do in the slot? Is it Jaquan McMillan, the young player out of ECU? I know he's had some good moments, but a young, inexperienced player. Is there going to be opportunities for Kincaid on him? Because they played Kincaid really as a big slot. Or is it Shakir, right? I mean, we know that Justin Simmons at safety, that's going to be an interesting chess piece for Denver. But for as much as it's Surtain versus Diggs, what do the rest of those matchups look like? And can the Bills take advantage of any of those? I think that's something that I'm going to definitely be paying a lot of attention to.
Yeah, definitely, especially with how the Broncos have struggled at times this season against tight ends. It's one of those things it's kind of a running joke back to Vance Joseph's first couple years as the head coach of the team, now kind of carrying into his time as defensive coordinator. How do you cover tight ends? Why are the tight ends always so consistently wide open against his defenses? So the Broncos they've tried a number of different things against that. I mean, Alex Singleton will drop into coverage. He does okay, and not in terms of one-on-one, like, hey, you make a move in space, Alex Singleton's going to hang with you, but he does a good job playing his spots. Josie Jewell as well, but Drew Sanders getting a lot more playing time lately. The Broncos have been switching to some 4-man fronts where Drew Sanders will come onto the field as that third linebacker in almost a traditional 4-3 alignment. And he does a lot of different things, from blitzing to dropping in coverage to kind of spying the quarterback. So he's one to watch. Jaquan McMillan has been, I'm glad you mentioned him, a key to this Broncos defensive resurgence over the last 3 games. They benched Isang Bassi a few weeks back and actually cut him and put Jaquan McMillan into the lineup, and he has been outstanding, just tremendous, whether it's making plays behind the line of scrimmage as a tackler or making plays in coverage. Had the interception off Pat Mahomes against the Kansas City Chiefs. So he's a key player for this Denver Broncos defense right now, especially as they kind of struggled to find what is the right personnel that we need to have out there. I mean, is it Bassi? Is it Mathis? Damari Mathis also been benched for the veteran Fabian Moreau. So the Broncos have made some key personnel changes in recent weeks defensively to be able to have this kind of resurgence that we're seeing now. When they're on offense, I'm interested from your perspective. Broncos been running the ball really, really well in recent weeks. They've kind of figured out that's their identity offensively. I'm not sure why it wasn't earlier than the last month or so, but it's become that finally. Bills, averaging 4.9 yards allowed on the ground this season. Is that an area that you worry about going into this matchup? I mean, or is it more so if we can limit Russell Wilson, we can limit the damage they can do on the ground?
Well, the Bills statistically are not a very good run defense. I think there's a lot of context that's important to that. There's a lot of times where the Bills actually just don't care about stopping the run. And they say, go ahead, run, get your rushing yards. And I think a good example of that is against Miami, where the Bills held Miami to like under 40 rushing yards in the first half. And then they're up 3-4 scores the rest of the way and said, go right ahead. Go right ahead and rack up a bunch of explosive runs. And they did. And then they lost by 28 points. You go back to week 1 against the Jets, and Breece Hall got them for some big gashing runs. What happens with the Bills defense is it's opportunistic stopping the run, but also it really comes down to their priority that they have going into a game for how much they want to stop it. I would say that it's less of a snap to snap consistency issue as it is opportunistic, but also just giving up some explosive runs, and those matter. I'm not taking those away. But they've added Linval Joseph to the interior of this defensive line. That showed up against Cincy. They did a great job bottling up Joe Mixon. So it can be leaky. There's no question about it. It's just a matter of, for the Bills, how much do they want to commit to it versus are they more concerned with the opportunities that Denver would have in the passing game? I think that's really where they're going to have to make a choice, and I'll be curious to see what that is. One thing that I'm also curious about in this matchup is this Denver pass rush. And the Bills have been pretty solid in pass protection this year, but I think Denver can stress them in some unique ways that not a lot of teams can. Baron Browning, I am an unapologetic Baron Browning fan. I had a first-round grade on him. So to see this happen and his glow-up, oh, man, I feel really good about that. And, I mean, just like you think about this Micah Parsons hybrid rush speed type player, man, he's got some juice. And I'm fascinated to see how they deploy him against the Bills. Nick Bonito, another really dynamic, young, speedy, bendy rusher. And not to mention Jonathan Cooper, not to mention Zach Allen, who's, kind of an interior guy, wins with a lot of power. So there's a lot of variety here with skill sets and a lot of different ways that you can attack a pocket and put stress on a pass protection. And so I'm very curious to see what type of protection schemes the Bills use to help with the speed or not help with the speed, and they think they can win some one-on-ones. I think it's going to be a big storyline, is that matchup of how Denver deploys a very versatile group of pass rushers and how the Bills deal with it.
Right. And how Josh Allen is able to work off the script, if he does get pressured initially. And the Broncos have pretty consistently struggled with that secondary pass rush. And this season, however, has been a bit of a difference in that regard. I mean, those guys that you're talking about, I mean, and adding in Jonathan Cooper and players like that who are they're all hustlers, which is great to see. Baron Browning, Nick Bonito, like those guys, I think you can tell when they're playing the game, they hate not finishing a pass rush. And so they make as much of an effort as they possibly can to finish the job if they get too deep in their rush and things like that. So I think that is going to be a fascinating area of this game, that everything is going to play off of that Broncos pass rush as it's improved over the last 3 weeks. That's where we've seen the improvements everywhere else, and the uptick in turnovers force and the uptick in, getting off the field on third down, really clamping down in the red zone as well. So those guys they're awesome to watch. There's a lot of speed out there. And the only question is are they going to be able to contain when Josh Allen breaks that pocket and he gets into scramble drill, things like that? Are those pass rushes that are effective initially, are they going to be wasted by Josh Allen's playmaking skills, or are those guys going to be able to finish when they're given opportunities and get off the field? That's been one of the toughest things for the Broncos, getting off the field on third down before a team is in scoring range. Once they get kind of close, they clamp down, but before the 50, man, they struggle to get off the field. So can they force some 3-and-outs? Can they get the ball to the offense with some good field position? That's a big question in this game.
All right. Well, we are going to put it all together here in the last segment. We're going to offer predictions and talk about what needs to go right for each team to win the game. But look, we spend a lot of time together, you and I. We get fired up together on wins and losses, who starts and who sits. I'm thankful for the connection that we have, and today I want our chat to be a little bit more personal. So whether you're on extended travel, bracing for a major weather event, or limited by yet another supply shortage, you are covered, my friend, thanks to our partners at Jase Medical. Life-saving antibiotics and a long list of daily medications can be ordered in a 1-year supply, even ED generics for Cialis, Viagra, and Revatio prescriptions. Go online right now at Jase Medical to receive your 12-month supply on your daily medication. Remember to use promo code LOCKEDON at checkout for a discount as well. A verified customer had this to say about Jase. Quote, "I am thankful for this service. Supply chain issues caused me to cut my pills in half and have to have it. I ordered the most of my daily meds for a year with a 1-year supply. I also ordered the antibiotic kit. I feel secure now. Prices are lower than local pharmacies, and I highly recommend this service for everyone. So if you or someone you love would like to get some peace of mind by having a year's supply of any daily medical, go to jasemedical.com to see if it's offered for you. Remember to use promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase." All right, Sayre, let's do the thing here. What has to go right for each team? And then we'll get to a prediction. When you think about Denver coming into Buffalo, what's got to go right for them to get a win?
Well, I think at this point you gotta run the ball extremely well, and you gotta be efficient in the passing game. I mean, not to boil it down to something so simple, but the Broncos just haven't had much variety in the passing game. They've been opportunistic at times over the last handful of weeks, but it's kind of similar to what you were talking about with the Bills' run defense. It's picking spots here and there where you may throw the ball downfield to Cortland Sutton. You may get a good result from it, but we won't see that again for the rest of the game. And how often do you attack, the middle intermediate part of the field with Jerry Jeudy, which has been borderline non-existent this season? Marvin Mims not getting enough opportunities. So you kind of balance that with, hey, we're having success in the run game and we need the passing, attack to kind of pick things up a little bit. It's not exactly a game in which you want to be trying things or, experimenting. But I think Sean Payton in this offense, they need to be more efficient in the passing game to be able to beat a team like Buffalo. You just can't. I just think right now, I don't know if you can necessarily trust that Denver defense to win you games consistently. I mean, they've been playing very, very well, but given what we've seen all throughout the course of the season, not just these last handful of weeks, you can't help but think you may need to score more points at some point in time. So don't try to play this ball control ultra conservative. Let Russell Wilson play in his game, establish the run. But I think the Broncos are going to have to throw the ball a little bit better than we've seen over the last 3 weeks if they want to go in and get a win on Monday Night Football.
I think for the Bills offensively, they got to find themselves and they got to find some consistency. And I know we've talked a lot about how much better Denver's defense has played. And I know the last 3 games especially have been a different story, but this still is the defense in the NFL that has given up the most yards per run and the most yards per pass. They've given up the second most points overall and the most overall yards. There should be some opportunities there. And I think whether it's challenging the secondary or complementing your passing game with opportunistic running. I know they bottled up Kansas City's rushing offense. Most people have, but they gave up 137 to Green Bay and 234 to the Jets and 171 to the Bears. Like, can you get James Cook going in this game and try to take advantage of that and really be two-dimensional on the offensive side of the football? And defensively, can you get a takeaway? The Bills have had 1 takeaway in the last 4 games. They have not intercepted a pass in the last 5. So can you be a little bit more opportunistic on defense despite your obvious personnel issues with the injuries that you suffered? And then on the other side of that, can you play a clean game on offense? The Bills haven't had a turnover-less game in 5 weeks. Meanwhile, this Denver defense forced Kansas City into 5 turnovers last week. And so I think it comes down to, can you get a takeaway? Can you play clean football on offense? And can you be more opportunistic on offense against a defense that, while it's played better, overall has had a lot of chinks in the armor? So now we have to do the thing here. We got to make a prediction. They make us do this, Sayre. The Bills are favored by 7.5. The over-under for this game is 46.5. What do you got?
I agree with you. I think that we have to do this, right? No. I love making predictions. I love it. The Broncos going into this, I never like to predict a loss, Joe, because I feel like that just, I'd rather have egg on my face predicting a win. So I always try to figure out what does it look like if the Broncos do win? So to go in Monday Night Football, I believe this would be their first win against Josh Allen in the NFL at this level for him. I would say Broncos 27, Bills 23 is the way that I could see this game going in Denver's favor, right? It's kind of close to that over-under, and it keeps it a close game throughout, but the Broncos, I don't think they're going to explode offensively. I think they're going to maybe have some opportunities. And like you said, with the Bills, can the Broncos force turnovers? That's how they've been winning a couple of games here lately in a row. So if they can force some turnovers, if they can get Josh Allen off his spot and maybe create some, strip sacks, things like that, I think there is a chance the Broncos go into Buffalo. Crazy as it may have sounded at the beginning of the season when every Broncos fan penciled this one in as a loss, I think they have a chance with the way they're playing right now, and especially with Sean Payton coming off bye weeks. I think he's 10-3 his last 13 coming off the bye. So we'll see how that factors into everything with having him as the head coach as opposed to a lot of first-time head coaches in recent years for the Broncos. So that chess match, we'll see how it goes. But I'll say Broncos 27, Bills 23.
All right, Sayre, I got a 28-20 Bills. And I think, the Bills are at home. They're favored by a touchdown. They need to have it. And I am certainly not diminishing the Denver Broncos, but something that I've learned about this team under Sean McDermott is that they don't really lose 2 games in a row. That's only happened 3 times since 2020. And the Bills coming off of a loss since 2020, which is kind of that line in the sand where I think the Bills really became one of the better teams in the league. They've got a 12-3 record and 80% win percentage coming off of a loss. That's second best in the NFL, only behind Kansas City. They also have the best average margin of victory coming off of a loss, 11.3, which is number 1 in the league over Kansas City by 3 points. The Bills are very good at bouncing back. They're at home. I know that Denver gets some extra rest in this game, but I think the Bills are backed up against the wall a little bit, and I don't expect them to not come out swinging and not come out and really, I don't want to say take care of their business, because I've already admitted that I don't think you can take anything for granted with the way that this Bills team has played, but I do think that they get this one and get, at least not suffer back-to-back losses and position themselves to be 6-4 going into an important divisional game next week against the New York Jets. Sayre, this has been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for everything that you've done to make it a good one. It's going to be a good one on Monday Night Football, so everybody stay up late and get ready for that. And there's plenty of more coverage coming your way from Locked On Broncos and Locked On Bills, of course, on Friday and Monday. So don't miss anything. Make sure that you're subscribed. We'd love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll catch up with you again real soon.